There are 10 recognized personality disorders in America. Chances are you know someone with one. Chances are even higher that person has absolutely no idea. Neither might you. Stay with me. Because one of these 10? You're going to see yourself in it. So what even is a personality disorder? Here's the short version. It's a deeply ingrained, inflexible pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving, one that causes real damage in a person's relationships, work, and daily life. And the thing that makes it so complicated? Most people living with one don't experience it as a disorder. They experience it as just who they are. That's the whole point. That's what makes this so hard and so important to understand. There are 10 types, organized into 3 groups. We're going through all of them. If you're new here, welcome. I've spent years trying to understand this stuff, not just academically, but because it matters to real people I care about. And if you're here, something brought you to this topic. That's worth following. So let me be upfront before we get into this. Personality disorders are one of the most talked about and most misunderstood topics in mental health right now. You've heard words like narcissist and borderline probably thrown around like insults on social media. And that's a problem. Because these are actual, diagnosable conditions affecting millions of real people. People who are not just being difficult. People who are often suffering quietly and don't even know why. So let's start at the very beginning, because where you start with this matters. What is a personality disorder? We all have a personality, right? We all have patterns: the way we respond when we feel threatened, how we handle being alone, the way we love people, the way we push them away. Those patterns are normal. They're human. But here's where it gets complicated. A personality disorder is when those patterns become so extreme, so rigid, and so deeply wired into a person that they start causing serious damage. To relationships. To work. To life. And they've been there since at least adolescence or early adulthood. These aren't situational. They're not a bad week. They're a consistent, years-long way of experiencing the world. Core symptoms across most personality disorders. Distorted or rigid ways of thinking about themselves and others. Emotional responses that feel off, too intense, too flat, too extreme. Impulsive behaviors they often can't explain afterward. Unstable relationships with a pattern of things going wrong. A self-image that shifts, cracks, or feels completely hollow. One more thing before we get into the types. Nobody chooses this. Nobody decided to have a personality disorder. It develops slowly, invisibly, shaped by biology and environment together. And that matters because understanding that changes how we treat the people around us. The 3 clusters. The American Psychiatric Association groups the 10 personality disorders into 3 clusters. Think of them as 3 emotional flavors. Cluster A: odd or eccentric. Cluster B: dramatic, emotional, or erratic. Cluster C: anxious or fearful. Let's start at the top. Cluster A: odd or eccentric. Cluster A disorders share one common thread: disconnection. Either from people, from reality, or from both. Keycap 1: paranoid personality disorder. A deep, persistent distrust and suspicion of other people even without actual evidence. Not nervousness. Not anxiety. Suspicion built into how they process everything around them. What it feels like from the inside. Imagine your best friend sends you a text, "Hey, can we talk later?" For most people, that's neutral. A little curious, maybe. For someone with paranoid personality disorder, that text sets off an internal alarm immediately. Why does she want to talk? What did I do? Is she planning something? Is she telling other people about me? And that spiral doesn't stop. It compounds. It colors every interaction for years. Symptoms. Suspects others of lying, deceiving, or plotting without real proof. Holds grudges and simply does not let them go. Reads hidden threats into innocent comments and situations. Reluctant to confide in anyone because they'll use it against them eventually. Appears cold, distant, and argumentative as a natural result. Keycap 2 Schizoid personality disorder. A genuine, pervasive preference for being alone combined with a very limited emotional range in social situations. And here's the important distinction, right away, this is not introversion. Introverts recharge alone but deeply value their close relationships. Someone with schizoid personality disorder genuinely doesn't desire close relationships, not because they've been hurt, not because they're afraid, but because the internal pull toward connection that most humans feel just isn't there. At least not in the way it exists for everyone else. What it feels like from the inside. Imagine you're at a family gathering. Everyone around you is laughing, hugging, talking fast. And you're sitting there not anxious, not depressed, not angry. Just watching. Unmoved. Like you're observing a documentary about a species you're not quite part of. That's not cruelty. That's not arrogance. That's just their reality. Symptoms. Chooses solitary activities consistently and deliberately. Little to no interest in sexual or intimate relationships. Takes genuine pleasure in very few things. Appears emotionally flat or detached to those around them. Indifferent to both praise and criticism. Keycap 3 Schizotypal personality disorder. Intense discomfort in close relationships, combined with distorted thinking and very eccentric behavior. This one often involves what clinicians call magical thinking, believing you have a sixth sense, that you can influence events with your mind, that coincidences carry secret messages meant specifically for you. What it feels like from the inside. You're walking down the street. A red car drives by. Then another. Then another. For most people, that's nothing. Just random cars. For someone with schizotypal personality disorder, those red cars feel like a signal. Something is being communicated. They just haven't decoded it yet. That's not a metaphor or an exaggeration. That's the actual texture of their inner world, day after day. Symptoms. Odd or elaborate, difficult to follow speech patterns. Belief in telepathy, clairvoyance, or personal omens in everyday events. Strange perceptual experiences. I felt like someone was in the room. Social anxiety that does not improve the better they know someone. Unusual appearance or behavior that others find difficult to describe. That's cluster A, the disconnected ones. Now let's get into the cluster everyone actually came here for. Cluster B, dramatic, emotional, or erratic. Cluster B. This is the cluster that dominates social media, gets the most misuse, and carries the heaviest stigma. Let's clear it all up. Right now. Keycap 4 Antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. A persistent pattern of disregarding and violating the rights of other people. This is what people roughly mean when they say sociopath, though that's not an actual clinical term. What it feels like from the inside. The person living with ASPD often doesn't experience their behavior as wrong. The internal voice that tells most people this will hurt someone and then stops them either isn't present or gets completely overridden by self-interest. That absence isn't a conscious choice, but it is genuinely dangerous. And here's what most people don't know: many people with ASPD learned very early that trust was a liability. That the only safe way to exist in the world was to take before being taken from. That doesn't excuse the harm, but it explains how the disorder takes root. Symptoms: repeatedly breaks laws or social norms without much concern. Lies and manipulates for personal gain and does it smoothly. Impulsive, largely unable to plan ahead. Aggressive, picks fights or conflicts easily. No remorse after hurting others. Irresponsible across all areas of life: money, work, family. Keycap 5 borderline personality disorder, BPD. Intense, often overwhelming instability in emotions, in relationships, in self-image, and in behavior. BPD is built on one core fear above all others: abandonment. The terror of being left or being about to be left is so intense that it drives behaviors that often end up pushing people away. Which confirms the fear. Which increases the terror. It's one of the cruelest cycles in all of mental health. What it feels like from the inside. Imagine loving someone with your entire being, genuinely believing they are the best thing that has ever happened to you. Then they cancel plans. A small thing. A completely normal thing. And within minutes, something shifts. They're not just canceling plans anymore. In your mind, they never really cared. You were fooling yourself. Everyone leaves. You are fundamentally, irreparably unlovable. And the pain from that isn't mild or manageable. It's a complete emotional emergency, like a wound that goes straight to the bone. That's BPD. Not being dramatic. Not seeking attention. A genuinely dysregulated emotional nervous system experiencing pain at a magnitude most people will never be asked to understand. Symptoms: desperate, frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, real or imagined. Relationships that swing hard between "you're everything to me" and "I hate you." Unstable, shifting sense of self: who am I, actually? Impulsive, self-damaging behaviors: spending, substances, risky choices. Self-harm or suicidal behavior or threats. Extreme mood swings that can shift within hours, sometimes minutes. A chronic, aching feeling of emptiness. Explosive anger, often followed by deep shame. Paranoia or dissociation under stress. The reality check you need to hear. People with BPD are often among the most empathetic, creative, deeply feeling humans you'll ever meet. The same sensitivity that causes the pain is the same sensitivity that makes them extraordinary as friends, as partners, as artists, as people who feel the world fully when most of us are just skimming the surface. They are not crazy. They are not dangerous by default. They are in tremendous, often unrelenting pain. And they deserve real help, not a label used to dismiss them. Keycap 6 histrionic personality disorder. A pattern of excessive emotionality and an intense, driving need for attention. People with histrionic personality disorder feel genuinely uncomfortable, almost distressed when they're not the center of what's happening around them. What it feels like from the inside. Imagine walking into a room. The conversation doesn't shift toward you. Nobody asks how you're doing first. Nobody notices. And something inside you starts to escalate, quietly at first, then not so quietly. The story you're telling gets bigger. The laugh gets louder. The outfit was chosen for exactly this moment. The emotion in your voice lifts just enough. Because being seen isn't a preference. It's a need that feels biological like air. That's not vanity. That's a person doing the only thing that makes them feel real. Symptoms: genuinely uncomfortable when not in the spotlight. Uses physical appearance to draw attention consistently. Emotions that shift quickly and feel theatrical to others. Vague, impressionistic speech, big feelings, few actual specifics. Considers relationships more intimate than they actually are. Easily influenced by others or by whatever environment they're in. Keycap 7 Narcissistic Personality Disorder, NPD. A persistent pattern of grandiosity, an excessive need for admiration, and a profound lack of empathy. Now I need to pause here for a second. Because narcissist has become the default word for any person who is selfish, unkind, or difficult to love. And that's not just inaccurate, it's harmful. To people who genuinely have NPD. And to people who were hurt by someone who was simply a bad partner. True NPD is rare. And it is complicated. What it feels like from the inside. Here's the part most people don't expect. Beneath the grandiosity, beneath the entitlement, beneath the need to be the most important person in every room, is often a self-image that is genuinely fragile. The narcissistic exterior is frequently a structure built over something much more vulnerable underneath. A performance of invulnerability that never, ever rests. That doesn't excuse the harm. But it explains the disorder. Symptoms: exaggerated sense of their own importance. Fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, or beauty. Believes they are uniquely special, only other exceptional people can understand them. Needs constant admiration and external validation. A strong, unyielding sense of entitlement. Rules exist for other people. Exploits others without guilt. Lacks empathy, cannot or will not recognize how others actually feel. Arrogant, dismissive of those they see as beneath them. Envious of others or certain that others envy them. Okay, cluster B is done. And I know some of that was heavy. But here's what I need you to know before we move into cluster C. This next cluster is the quiet one. The one nobody really talks about. And I'd bet money that at least one of these next 3 disorders is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. Let's find out. Cluster C, anxious or fearful. Cluster C disorders share one root, fear. Not the fear of a specific thing, but a deeper, structural fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. Fear of losing control. Fear of being alone or of being with people. Keycap 8 Avoidant Personality Disorder. Extreme social inhibition, deep feelings of inadequacy, and an intense sensitivity to any form of negative evaluation. And here's the painful twist: people with avoidant personality disorder usually want connection. Badly. They're not indifferent like someone with schizoid personality disorder. They desperately want to be loved and are terrified, paralyzed, by the possibility of rejection. What it feels like from the inside. You want to go to the party. You actually want to meet people. But the moment you picture walking through that door, you're already replaying the moment someone doesn't laugh at your joke. The look someone gives when you say something awkward. The drive home alone after another night where it just didn't work. So you don't go. You tell yourself it's fine. But it isn't. Symptoms: avoids work or social activities that involve interpersonal contact, fear of criticism. Won't engage with people unless almost certain they'll be liked first. Holds back in close relationships out of fear of shame or ridicule. Preoccupied with the possibility of rejection in social situations. Sees self as socially inept, unappealing, or fundamentally inferior. Won't try new things because embarrassment feels like a catastrophic risk. Keycap 9 Dependent personality disorder. An overwhelming need to be taken care of leading to clingy, submissive behavior and a pervasive fear of being on your own. What it feels like from the inside. Making a decision, even a small one, like where to eat or which job to take, feels genuinely impossible without someone else's input first. Not laziness. Not indecisiveness. The weight of choosing feels like something that could crush you. So you hand it to someone else. And then you hold on to that person for everything you're worth because without them, you genuinely don't know how to exist. And when that person treats you badly, you find a reason to stay. Because being mistreated by someone is still better than the terror of being completely alone. Symptoms. Difficulty making everyday decisions without excessive reassurance from others. Need someone else to take responsibility for most major areas of life. Won't disagree with people. The fear of losing their support is too great. Difficulty being alone. It feels frightening, not peaceful or freeing. Will tolerate mistreatment to keep a relationship intact. When a relationship ends, immediately and urgently seeks a new one. Keycap 10 Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Okay, before we get into this one, I need to stop you right there. Because this is the most commonly confused disorder in this entire video. OCPD is not OCD. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder. It involves unwanted, intrusive thoughts and compulsions that the person usually recognizes as irrational and desperately wishes they could stop. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder is a way of being that feels completely right and justified to the person. Rigid order, perfectionism, control not experienced as a disturbance, but as a deeply held personal value. Same sounding name. Completely different experience. A pervasive preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, and control at the expense of flexibility, relationships, and ironically, actually finishing things. What it feels like from the inside. You're working on a project. It needs to be perfect before you can move on. So you adjust it. And adjust it again. And then you notice that the person working with you isn't doing it right, so you take it back. Because it'll be faster and better if you just do it yourself. 3 hours later, you've barely moved forward. But at least it's right. At least it's right. And your relationship with that coworker? Slightly more fractured than it was yesterday. Symptoms. Preoccupied with rules, details, lists, schedules to the point of missing the larger purpose. Perfectionism that actively prevents completing tasks. Work and productivity consume life, leisure and relationships get the leftovers. Inflexible about morality, ethics, and personal values, no gray areas. Cannot discard worn-out or worthless objects. Struggles to delegate because no one else will do it exactly right. Rigid, stubborn, slow to compromise on almost anything. What causes personality disorders? Now here's the part that surprises most people. Because when you hear personality disorder, you probably assume automatically trauma. A rough childhood. Something terrible that happened. And yes, trauma is one factor. But here's the most counterintuitive truth about this. Some people develop personality disorders with no significant trauma history at all. Because sometimes a brain is simply wired differently from birth. The emotional thermostat is calibrated in a way that makes certain responses more extreme, more rigid, more consistent regardless of what life has actually thrown at them. The full picture: what research actually shows. Genetics: multiple personality disorders run in families. Twin studies suggest a real heritable component. You can inherit the predisposition without inheriting the experiences that typically trigger it. Brain structure and chemistry: research has found differences in how key brain regions function in people with certain disorders. Specifically, the amygdala, the part of your brain that sounds the emotional alarm, and the prefrontal cortex, the part that's supposed to calm it back down. When those two aren't communicating well, emotions become overwhelming. Impulses win. That's not a character flaw. That's neurobiology. Childhood attachment and trauma, neglect, abuse, inconsistent parenting, or a home that never felt emotionally safe can shape how a child learns to regulate emotions, trust others, and understand their own worth. Those early lessons get deeply, structurally wired in, and they tend to stay. Environment over time: prolonged stress, toxic relationships, and cultural pressures don't create personality disorders on their own, but they can accelerate patterns that were already quietly forming underneath. The bottom line? Nature turned up certain dials. Environment decided how loud they'd play. And knowing that changes everything about how we see people, including ourselves. Treatment: what actually works. All right. This is the most important section in the whole video. And I want to be very direct with you. Personality disorders are treatable. Not always cured the way a broken bone is cured. But people with personality disorders absolutely get better. They learn to regulate emotions that once felt completely uncontrollable. They build relationships they couldn't sustain before. They live full, connected, genuinely meaningful lives. That's not a motivational statement. That's what the research actually shows. 1. Psychotherapy. This is where real, lasting change happens for most people. DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, the gold standard for BPD and increasingly used for other disorders too. It builds 4 core skills: mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. Studies show that over 75% of BPD patients who complete DBT no longer meet the full diagnostic criteria after 2 years of treatment. Not a small number. Transformative. CBT identifies and restructures the negative thought patterns driving destructive behavior. Especially effective for cluster C disorders. Schema therapy. This one asks a question most of us have never been asked directly: where did you learn to believe that about yourself? It goes after the core beliefs, the schemas formed in childhood that are still quietly running the show in adulthood. Psychodynamic therapy, about understanding why the past keeps showing up in the present uninvited. It makes the unconscious patterns visible so they lose their power over you. 2. Medication. There's no pill specifically designed to treat a personality disorder. But medication can genuinely help manage what comes alongside them: depression, anxiety, impulsive behavior, severe mood swings. Common options depending on symptoms: antidepressants, mood stabilizers, anti-anxiety medications, low-dose antipsychotics in some cases. Always work with a psychiatrist on this. Medication alone is not the answer, but in combination with therapy, it can open doors that felt completely, permanently closed. 3. Community and support. Organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, offer support groups, education programs, and real community for people with personality disorders and for the people who love them. Being truly understood by even one person changes what feels possible. 4. Daily practices, the small things that compound. None of these replace professional help. But here's what I know. The people who get better fastest are usually the ones doing something between sessions. Small things. Consistent things. Things that slowly become a different way of living. Mindfulness, learning to observe your thoughts rather than becoming them. Journaling, giving the inner world somewhere to go that isn't another person. Building routine structure genuinely calms nervous systems that have lived in chaos. Learning your triggers so they stop running you from the shadows. The road isn't linear. There are setbacks. There are hard days after good ones. But progress is real. And people are living it every single day. If you made it this far, I want to say something to you directly. Whether you watch this to understand yourself, or someone you love, or just because you were curious, you just spent 25 minutes trying to understand something most people never bother to look at. That's not passive. That's courage with a lowercase c. And if anything in this video felt personal, if you recognized yourself in one of those inside scenarios, or a name for something you've quietly felt for years just showed up on the screen today, that's not a verdict. That's not a label. That's information. And information is where the path forward actually begins. Getting help is not weakness. Asking questions is not weakness. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your patterns. You are a person full, complex, and capable of more than what your worst patterns have been telling you. I believe that. And I hope, after today, you do too. Alright, before you go, if this video gave you something real today, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this reach the people who need it most. Subscribe if you want more mental health content that treats you like an adult, not a patient, not a statistic. Just a human being trying to figure things out. And share this. Seriously. You never know who in your circle is quietly struggling with exactly what we just covered. Sharing takes 2 seconds and could mean more than you realize. And one last thing. I want to leave you with this question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Which of the 10 disorders did you least expect to recognize yourself in and then kind of did? No judgment here. Say what's true for you. I'll be in the comments. Talk to you there.